Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are so glad you're able to join us. So you know you're in the right place. This is the Safety and Wellbeing panel, and we'll be together for an hour here. So we're going to get started with a quick set of introductions because I want to leave as much time as possible for your questions. So I'm joined by a group of panelists here who are amazing resources and experts here on campus. We're each going to introduce ourselves, and we're going to share our favorite safety and well-being tip and or resource for Frosh and for first-year students. So I will start us off. I am Susie Brubaker-Cole. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Vice Provost for Student Affairs at Stanford. Just so you get a sense of what Student Affairs is, in Student Affairs, we support much of student life outside the classroom, which includes students' residential experience, student organizations, our student health center, our career education, our community centers, the Bechtel International Center, the University Registrar, student financial services, and much more. So let me share with you my safety and well-being tip. It's pretty broad, but I think it's really important. And my tip for you is that one of the most important parts of your well-being are your friendships and community connections. So you'll, of course, probably be thinking right away about pursuing these friendships and community connections in your residences. But my tip is to also make sure that you think about pursuing belonging to other communities on campus. And that might be a student organization, it might be a music group, it could be a research group. But I want you to think about over your time here, making sure that you're pursuing maybe 3 important places of belonging. And one of those may be your family at home. And I want to remind you, as my tip, that it also takes time to form these, and that you have that time, and that you have our support in finding those connections. So that's my tip. Before I hand the mic to my fellow panelists, I also want you to know that we are here for you, to support you in finding your places of belonging, and we are ready for you. Over this past year, there has been loss and disappointment and disconnection for all of us. And there has been a great deal of perseverance in the face of tough times. And I would like to congratulate you on your admission to Stanford. And I would also like to congratulate and thank your families for all that they've done over this past year to help out as your mentor, your coach, your friend, your supporter. All of this prepares us, I think, to be together in the fall with gratitude and joy, and I am so looking forward to it. So now I'd like to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and I will start off with Alex. Alex, to you.
Thank you very much, Susie. I'm so glad to be a part of this panel. This is so core to what we do in recreation and wellness. So I'm a Stanford graduate. I received my BA in political science and my master's in education here. I ran cross country and track, but importantly beyond sports, I was very involved in residence life, helping to manage a number of what are called self-ops on our campus. And I also was a writer for an entertainment magazine and really was able to see a lot of different sides of the university. After Stanford, I worked at Portland State University mostly, where I received my doctorate. And there I studied how sports and recreation can help students develop empathy with each other. And we really try to focus that in our work. And it aligns well with Susie's conversation around belonging. I'm relatively new in my position here on the farm. I've been here about 18 months in my new position. And rec and wellness is part of the Department of Athletics. And we're really glad to be a part of that family and bring you a whole bunch of great wellness opportunities. In terms of what I would offer you, I think Susie hit the nail on the head. Please get involved quickly. Makes a big difference, the research shows. And I would encourage you to think about learning something new when you get here, really intentionally trying to think about how you create your own wellness resources and taking the time to give that attention. It'll be very important that you give that your self-care some attention when you're here. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Alex. And next I'll ask Ralph to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Ralph Castro. I direct all of our alcohol and drug prevention and early intervention programs on campus. We take a multifaceted approach, which is rooted in public health, to really take a deep dive around education and encouraging students to make good, sound decisions around substance use. One of the things we really look at is how do we empower students to make good choices, not only for themselves, but for each other. As we live in community, it's important for everyone to be aware of their residential area so that they, are making good decisions. We have programs that deal with the campus as a whole and also with groups. So we do alcohol-free social programs on campus, which are very popular. We have a 5 SURE program, which is Students United for Risk Elimination, that offers safe rides and tables in high traffic party areas on the weekends, gives out snacks, waters, and safe walks home. They're known for their signature snack, which is Pop-Tarts. So you could see them on campus providing support. We also do a lot of online education. So you look for that this summer with an online program called Alcohol EDU. But really it's about normalizing what's expected. And not everybody uses alcohol. And that's an important point for you to know, that this is a place where students can choose not to use and feel accepted in the community. And we want students to feel comfortable. And if they choose to experiment, we're going to educate and we're going to provide support. But at the same time, we hold students accountable if they engage in behavior that is either putting themselves or others at risk. So I'll be around to answer some more questions specifically about that. My tip that I'll give you is that you should go to the Axe and Palm on a late night and get a shake and waffle fries. Nothing heals the soul better than a shake and waffle fries from the Axe and Palm. So I encourage you to go there, take a look, be in community with others, and make good choices when you get here. Thank you.
That's great, Ralph. Thank you. The Axe and Palm is in Old Union, which is the building behind me. So you know where to find the Axe and Palm for that shake and fries. I'm hungry already. I'm going to pass now to Daryl, please, for introduction.
Hello, everyone. So happy to be here. My name is Daryl Green, and I am a associate dean. I work out of the Dean of Students office. I've been in this role since October 2021. October of 20, and before then I was a residence dean, which basically boots on the ground. I'm still boots on the ground. Just a little bit about the Dean of Students office. What we do is we respond to individual students and students groups in crisis. We support students who are struggling with mental health and well-being concerns, supporting students impacted by acts of intolerance, and also, I redirect students when their behaviors and choices are negatively impacting their experience or experience of others. And we support students who are seeking community and belonging. Sorry for my train. So sorry for that. And guiding students in navigating campus resources and university policies. My tip, I love what Susie just said. I'm a person who love to hang out with the students and just get to learn what their experience is, whether it's music, whether it's favorite things they like to do, hobbies. And so my tip is, get out there and take a risk in building relationships, some positive relationships. I know what I like about, working on the campus is people come from all walks of life. And it's just amazing when I see so much diversity on the campus in small groups. So I encourage you to take a risk. You work so hard to get here, and it's just time to do a lot of the coursework and also have fun and engage with other folks.
Thank you, Daryl. There's so much care in what you said, which represents all the Care and Dean of students. We really appreciate you. I will hand to Inga now.
Hey, everybody. I'm Inga Hansen. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a psychologist, and I'm in my 13th year at Stanford at this point, lucky 13. Really good to kind of virtually meet and talk with all of you. I have a few roles on campus. I'm the director of well-being at Stanford and also the director of the Wyland Health Initiative, which promotes mental health and well-being across all genders and sexualities. And I'm also just here representing CAPS, or Counseling and Psychological Services. So I'll touch a little bit on each of those. CAPS provides short-term therapy, brief therapy, so we can reach everybody who needs support. And they also offer referrals to long-term options as needed. And I'll put some of these in the chat so you have links to get a little bit more information about each of these services as might be helpful for you. Wellbeing at Stanford is a relatively new program, which is a couple years old, and we offer coaching to help students make shifts in beliefs and behaviors to improve their overall well-being, sometimes clarify goals or values, or we can offer support when people are struggling, or just kind of have more connection and community as part of their experience on campus. And then also for all of you, for families, and then just something to be aware of in a broader campus, we offer warm training in the Stanford Red folder, and they have tips for talking with your child, your student, through tough times, or just how to get connected in different ways. So everything from crisis support to community connection and different resources, and just how to have some difficult conversations if the challenges come up, because challenges come up in all of our lives at different points. And something that CAPS, Wellbeing, and Wyland all have in common is we have just a pretty wide range of cross-disciplinary staff. And we're all very committed to providing care that's rooted in cultural humility and social justice values. We're all committed to being anti-racist programs and departments on this campus. And I think you'll see that in the work that we do and how we interact with students. The wellness tip, it was hard to pick a wellness tip because there's, it feels like our job, right? There's like so many that come to my mind. But one thing I talk about with students a lot is that your schedules can get so booked between classes and clubs and activities and so on. And then so time for yourself can be the thing that's left over after everything else in your schedule. And so one thing that I'd love to recommend is actually blocking an hour or some time for yourself every day and treat it just as important as any other meeting or appointment that you have. And whether that time is spent, in solitude, or actually one thing I recommend is when you're on campus, exploring campus and finding kind of your own secret place. It's a huge campus and there's a lot of really beautiful spots that you can kind of have your own favorite place to just kind of be with yourself and decompress. And that can be so important during your experience here.
Thank you, Inga. What a great idea to find your secret place. I want to go do that myself. And last but not least, I'm thrilled to have Chief Laura Wilson from the Department of Public Safety to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Wilson, and I am the Director of the Department of Public Safety, also referred to as the Chief of Police. A little bit about the department. We provide police and security services to the main Stanford campus 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The department is comprised of approximately 70 full-time employees, including 30 deputy sheriffs, 20 public safety officers, 5 community service officers, and 15 civilian staff. That might sound like a lot of people, but because we are a 24/7 operation, our staff is really actually spread out over 168 hours per week. So the department's pretty small compared to other campuses. A little about me. I started as a deputy with the department after graduating from Stanford with a degree in human biology. Like Alex, I actually ran track at Stanford. And I actually switched to a club sport for my junior and senior year, which was also a great experience. So I'm a big fan of our sports programs. I had planned to go to medical school and become an emergency room doctor. And there's a much longer story behind that detour that resulted in my becoming a peace officer. But what I think is relevant to you is that as I moved up through the organization from being a deputy to a training officer to a sergeant to a lieutenant and now the chief, is that I have continually expected all DPS personnel to treat people the way they would want the police to treat a loved one, be that loved one be a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a cousin, or best friend. Being really honest, there's a lot of negativity being expressed about the police these days, some of which is warranted. Some of you may have had a negative experience with a police officer. Others may know someone who's had a negative encounter. Many of you have probably never had an encounter with a police officer and might be basing your opinion about police and policing based on what you hear and read. I truly believe in my heart that the people who comprise DPS care about the community and want people to not only be safe, but feel safe. We're human and fallible, but I don't know anyone at DPS who doesn't want to provide great service to the community. And we are dedicated to continually trying to improve. Our ability to function relies on earning and maintaining the public's trust. And if you decide to come to Stanford, which I encourage you to do, I'm going to give you a challenge that Daryl's comments and maybe even Inga's comments led me to think about while they were talking. So if you come to Stanford and you introduce yourself to 10 people from my department and take a selfie with them, I will buy you lunch at a place of your choosing, perhaps the Axe and Palm to have the great waffle fries, reasonably priced lunch. And I will put the directions on the Stanford website, which is police.stanford.edu. And that way, maybe we can start to bridge a little bit of trust. So, and Susie, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks so much, Laura. That is an awesome invitation. I hope that our listeners take you up on that. I just love it. Thank you, everyone, for your introductions and for your tips. Those were really great to listen to. I also want to, before we launch into questions, thank all the students and families who submitted questions ahead of time. We also know that some of you may have questions for us after the panel is over, and we are still here to respond. So know that you can reach us at mykidis@stanford.edu. mykidis@stanford.edu. So with that, I'm going to turn to our first question, which was one that was submitted in advance. And Alex, this question is going to be for you. It is, can you tell me a little bit more about the recreation and wellness options on campus? I played a sport in high school and want to continue playing. How do I do that?
Great, thanks, Susie. We theme our stuff into 4 categories. We talk about movement, play, adventure, and learning. And all of that's guided to do exactly what we're here to talk about, is to support student well-being. We're really focused on helping people exercise in whatever way they can, because we really think that sets you up to be successful in your classes and in your social life, or help you navigate any challenges you may face. We really believe exercise and movement is core to being successful here. The campus has incredible resources. We have 2 separate rec centers. We have an aquatic center. There are countless outdoor fields. There are tons of basketball and volleyball courts. We have lots of walking and running trails, including the famous Dish. And the entire campus is really a tremendous place to be able to do a lot of self-directed exercises. Our programs are varied as well. So we have both academic and non-academic classes. So you can take classes for credit or not for credit to learn a skill. As Susie mentioned, there's a lot of student organizations. In our portfolio, we have about 50 student-based sport and recreation clubs, and that's typically how you would evolve from being a high school athlete. If you're on the varsity side, you would get involved with one of our student-based clubs, and 50, there's a lot. Like Inga, I will put our link to our page in there so you can see more directly what our clubs we have. We offer intramural sports, which are not quite as competitive and don't quite have the same commitment level. We have a comprehensive fitness programming with things like yoga and boot camp. Our outdoor program is among the best in the country. Our building is called the Center for Outdoor Education and Recreation. So we have guided outdoor trips and a rental gear center and a large climbing gym. Hopefully we'll be able to offer, for those of you that are coming to Stanford, we have something called a pre-orientation trip that involves students going cohorts outdoors. We're hoping to pull that off this next fall if we can. And then of course, there's lots of space for your own self-directed exercise. So that hopefully provides some answers to that question, Susie. And I'll put our link to our website so you can see what that's like, particularly around the club sports.
Thanks, Alex. That was a great overview. Really appreciate it. I'll move on to our second question, which looks like it's from one of our family members. So Daryl, I'm going to ask if you could respond to this question, please. Mm-hmm. And it is, will Stanford contact me if my student needs help? So Daryl, over to you.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. It's also I think it's a sensitive question as well. So to answer it, addition day, and usually when they're in the hospital, the providers usually reach out to the parents as well, and also we contact the parents if there's a pattern of disruptiveness in the community, and the student could be at risk, a safety risk. The community can be at a safety risk. So yeah, we will contact the parents in those situations. Now, we won't contact the parents if these students work so hard to get here. And sometimes we will not contact the parents if they need help in terms of, like I said earlier, navigating resources. Sometimes they get lonely. And so we don't contact the parents in those type situations. What I do like about working for Stanford, we have amazing resources. We have the residence dean, we have community directors where the students could tap in, and sometimes these students just want to talk. And so, yeah, there's situations where we don't, and there's situations where we definitely do. And we have to take a look at, there's HIPAA laws where they have we have to protect the students' rights and things like that. And so, yeah, it's tricky sometimes, but when they have these extreme situations, we definitely contact the parents.
Thanks, Daryl. Appreciate that very much. I will move to our next question. And, in this year of the pandemic, I think there's a lot of people who haven't been able to come to campus yet. And I think this question comes from one person who's in that situation. So that question is, why is the Stanford police system so robust? Is crime a serious problem? We've never been to the area or visited campus, they say. So Laura, I think that's a good one for you.
Sure. So you can't tell from my face here, but I'm a fairly petite woman, and I have been running around Campus Drive for 35 years. I actually feel quite safe when I come to campus, and it really is a place that, yeah, it's just a place I feel safe. I feel safe not because I'm a police officer, but just because there is a low incidence of crimes against persons. We do have property crime. One of my tips that I forgot to mention is don't buy an expensive bicycle and do buy a good lock. Sometimes, if you leave your property unattended, people will steal. We have an open campus. But on the whole, I find Stanford to be quite a safe place, particularly if you just use some good common sense in how you go about doing things. And then as far as the police department being robust, I guess that's a matter of opinion. If you were to ask my staff, they would say there's not enough. But we do a lot with smoke and mirrors and making sure that we're out there. And one thing that I just want to reiterate is how much I value my colleagues, and it really is a community. And so when someone needs help, it may not be the police that responds. It may be an RD or someone, it may be Ralph's group or someone else. So it's a community.
Thanks very much, Laura. Our next question is a good follow-up to Inga's introduction of the mental health and well-being resources. And it is, could you tell me more about CAPS? How is it as a service? Do they do any work around stress and coping prevention? So Inga, if you could take that question, please.
Absolutely. So talking a little bit about CAPS, I'll talk a little bit about services broadly and then maybe specifically focus on stress prevention and coping. So students can be seen by CAPS by contacting the access coordinator, which can be either a call or coming in. It's a pretty brief contact, but you can get in pretty quickly for that initial conversation, which is just to get a sense of what a student needs and what kind of service would be the best fit for them. And then very often a follow-up to that is meeting with one of the clinicians for initial session, and then potentially for short-term counseling services like we talked about before. Some of the other services besides the individual counseling also includes med management for people for whom that might be important. And then also a lot of services that are really more focused on prevention, community health, and the like. And so that's one of the places where our organization, Wellbeing and CAPS, coordinate and work together pretty closely. So the short answer is that yes, there are a lot of resources along those lines. We try to be proactive and preventative rather than reactive whenever possible. And I think one of the strengths here is actually how our different units and programs work together. There's 6 different units that are part of Vaden Health Services that are all very dedicated to thinking about outreach, prevention, education, and so on. We call ourselves the Vaden Flourishing Alliance. We meet weekly to talk about student needs and anticipate needs and so on. And we even have a request form that students or community members can fill out if they'd like a workshop, if they'd like a panel, if they'd like a training on something. And so we're responding to those in real time, and we're often able to meet students exactly where they are with what they need, as well as initiate some programs on our own just based on themes or patterns that we're noticing, so that we can be responsive to what's going on in a given quarter and sometimes even in a given week. And so some of those do include things that are like, how do we want to deal with isolation during COVID and helping people feel connected? How are we dealing with some of the incidents that are happening nationally and how people are feeling about that? And then also things that we know are perennial needs, such as we have workshops and groups. This is CAPS and Wellbeing, thinking about things like how to sleep better, how to manage stress and anxiety, how to build your coping skills just with all that you're juggling and managing during your time here. Things like that we've just hear over and over again. We make sure that those are programs that are always available. And many of those show up as workshop series, as well as skills and tools that individual counselors and coaches can help students with along the way.
Thanks, Inga. What's beautiful about all that range of services is that there are things that empower students to help themselves and places for students to go to get help. And that's a great combination. Yeah. I'll move on to our next question. It is as follows. I am a parent of a student who is a person of color. I am concerned about the experience my child will have with police on campus. Well, thank you very much, Mom or Dad, who sent that. This is a concern across the country, as Laura noted in her introductory remarks, and I'm really glad we have a chance to discuss this and address it. I'll start with a response, and then Laura, I'll hand it over to you if you want to add some thoughts afterwards. So first, I'll share that the university is taking a broad approach to the question of belonging and community and diversity and equity and inclusion on campus. It's under the title of IDEAL, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access in a Learning Community, that is under the auspices of the President's Office. So this goes all the way up to the top of the university and all the way back down through. There's a wonderful website that discusses all of the different components of this initiative on campus that I would encourage you all to look at. One piece of this broad approach is a body that is active currently called the Community Board on Public Safety. Additionally, if you're interested in more pieces of the IDEAL initiative, there's a huge initiative to diversify our faculty and staff appointments and to provide training and education around diversity, equity, inclusion for all members of campus and so on. But just to give you a little more information on this community board on public safety, because it directly addresses the question from our parent. President Tessie Levine established the board to ensure that Stanford is maintaining a healthy and safe environment. And also to ensure that the university's public safety policies and practices are consistent with our university values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have 2 co-chairs for the board. These are Patrick Dunkley, who is just finishing his tenure as Deputy Athletic Director and becoming a Vice Provost overseeing diversity and equity. And then Professor Claude Steele, who is a Professor Emeritus of Psychology. It has 16 members that represent students, faculty, and staff. And there's also a community member on the board. The board's work is taking place in 3 phases. First is education and community input, which is, I think, a phase that's just starting to wrap up. Second, work groups to develop recommendations. And then third, final recommendations with the goal of producing a report to the president. The board is independent, but it's working very closely with DPS, and it is something that a lot of attention on the campus is attuned to, and we're deeply grateful for all of the community members who are providing information to that board. So I hope that that's helpful in understanding some of our approach to ensuring that we are thinking about how policing occurs on our campus in alignment with our values. And Laura, maybe I could hand off to you if there's anything you'd like to add to my response.
Sure. I alluded to it a little bit in my opening remarks that public safety or policing was not what I thought I was going to do when I was going to Stanford. In fact, it's probably the last thing I would have ever considered. And if you were to ask my friends, I was sort of a peace, love, happiness, magic happens kind of person. So this was in a way, an odd choice. And there have been times throughout my tenure where I've questioned whether or not I wanted to remain, particularly when things are not so pleasant. And something that I am deeply, deeply, deeply committed to is inclusion and diversity and equity. Those are deeply held core values for me. And so I endeavor to use my position, which I recognize as a position of authority, to promote those ideals. And if you were to ask people who work for the department, they would tell you that I simply will not tolerate people not treating people with respect. And certainly there is implicit bias and there's work to be done. And I'm hopeful that the university will help create research that will help all of us address our implicit biases. And just, I guess what I can say is just know that I care deeply about this community and the people who comprise it. And you have my commitment that your child should be safe while they are at Stanford. And if they're not, or if they have a negative experience, email me, reach out to me, and we will address it. And I hope that we can address it in a way that creates greater understanding and collaboration and makes Stanford what we want it to be, which is really a place where people can feel safe, feel valued, feel empowered to learn and to grow.
Thanks very much, Laura. Let's see, I'm going to go down our list here. So I have 2 questions relating to recreation. So Alex, I think 2 questions for you now. First, is fencing one of our club sport opportunities on campus? And then second, do we have self-defense classes?
Sure, thanks. So fencing is currently a varsity sport. They ended up their season lately. They are one of the teams that is most likely going to transition to club sport status this coming fall. That decision was announced about 8 months ago, 8 to 10 months ago, and is currently being revisited by the president and the board of trustees. If that decision stays, then we will have a very robust fencing program. We do have a room dedicated solely to fencing. And if it stays as a varsity sport, there's still opportunities to fence. But it would be as a varsity sport or as a community member. If the decision remains to have them become clubs, that'll be official starting whenever the president says that happens. But we have plans to have them be one of our high tier club sports starting this fall. And then we do offer self-defense courses through our PE program. I'm fairly certain that there are also a number of other places that will offer self-defense courses. Oftentimes Residence Life will do that and they'll hire people. Sometimes public safety will do that, Laura. And so I don't know if others can speak to that answer, but we do offer that on campus a number of different times through a number of different avenues.
Thanks, Alex. Would anyone else like to comment on any component of that? Okay, thanks very much. I'll move on to our next question. Ralph, this one's going to go to you. What resources are available for parents, guardians, and families to prepare students for college, alcohol, and drug concerns? Great question. And thank you, parents, for caring and being involved in this.
Yeah, thanks, Susie. I'll speak to this as a public health expert, but also as a parent of a 17-year-old. It's very important to have these frank conversations. As you know, we created a resource guide last year that's on our website to encourage parents, guardians, and families to have open conversations. There's tips in there about how to start those conversations, how to keep the conversation going while your student is enrolled. and some research that shows that parents can have and guardians can have a huge impact on your students' decisions to use substances or to not. So I encourage you to take a look at that resource guide, have those conversations, talk about your expectations and your values around substances, and check in regularly. We oftentimes tell you to take a back seat around grades and academics and those things. But when it comes to alcohol and drugs, we want you to ask the questions like, who are you? Who are your friends? What are you doing for fun? Just checking in. Very similar to how you do in high school. In college, it's much different, obviously, but continue that dialogue because it can have a huge impact. Thanks.
Thank you, Ralph. Going to a really important safety question. The question is, what is the amount of fine for riding a bicycle without wearing a helmet? Let me say that every single person on Stanford's campus who rides a bicycle wears a helmet, right, Laura? I'll pass it to you.
So if you are over the age of 16, I think it's 16, you don't actually have to wear a helmet by law on campus. That said, I will share a personal story. I was struck by a car on Friday at a fairly high rate of speed while I was out riding my bicycle in the beautiful hills behind me. What I didn't share is the club sport that I switched to was cycling. And so I've been cycling and I'm quite proficient, and someone cut a corner and hit me at a fairly high rate of speed. And I'm fairly certain if I had not been wearing a helmet, I would not be here today talking to you. And so one can be deceived into thinking that everything is safe at on campus, and it is. And most people drive safely on campus, but you just never know when someone might miss a stop sign. Sorry about my dogs in the background. And so I am an absolute, particularly after last week, I'm just an absolute huge proponent of wearing a helmet. You're spending a lot of money and a lot of energy coming to Stanford. And one of the most important things you have is your brain. And so protect your brain.
Thank you, Laura, and I hope you're well and healing. I am also an avid cyclist, and I ride my bike around campus to get around because it's a big campus and it takes a long time to get around. I also will just share quickly that my dentist is in the Stanford Medical School, and he's the dentist that's called to do all of the repairs of teeth when students have accidents. And just take my word for it. It's serious bike accidents happen on campus, so get the helmet on. Okay, I sound like a mom because I am one. I also have an 18-year-old son. So, but I'm going to move on to our next question. The next question is, I've heard that how dorms work is changing. Can you describe what the neighborhoods are and how this is going to work? This is great. This is absolutely a well-being question. If you'll think about my tip, I talked about how important community and belonging is to a person's well-being. So I'm really glad that someone has asked about the residences. So I am so excited to share that you will be the first frosh and transfer class to live in a Stanford neighborhood. So congratulations, this is an amazing opportunity for you. This means that you will have a place to call home, your neighborhood, the whole time you're an undergraduate here at Stanford across your 2, 3, 4 years, however you count it, depending on where you are as a transfer or frosh. So we will have 7 neighborhoods, and everyone in your class will be assigned to a neighborhood. And that's where you'll live with other sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So you'll be able to make friends across class years and have mentors across class years, which is just really exciting and terrific. You have probably also heard about the really terrific array of theme houses and co-ops that are going to be a part of neighborhoods. You will be able to apply to live in these places as well, whether or not they're in your neighborhood. So you'll be assigned to one neighborhood, but you'll have a chance to go and live in theme housing or co-ops in other neighborhoods. Some people call this neighborhooding abroad, which I think is really cool. During your first year, you will live in either an all first year house or a theme house with programs for first years. Students tell us this is a huge help in terms of acclimating to Stanford and meeting people. So we've already engineered that into the places you're going to live when you come to Stanford. You're going to be receiving a lot more detail on housing and dining later, but I'm so glad that this is being brought up now because we created the neighborhoods based on student feedback. Students told us that they would love to be able to live with their friend groups for all 4 of their years here, or fewer years if you're a transfer student, and that this would be a huge help in terms of their well-being. So we're so pleased to be able to offer this opportunity for you all. And we can't wait to see what creative ideas and energy you bring as the inaugural class coming into these neighborhoods to design the traditions that will last for years to come. So we can't wait to have you come. And I'm so pleased that this question was asked. And there's a lot more information on website. So I hope you'll look that up. Okay, moving on. Let's see. Daryl, this next question is a good one for you from Dean of Students Office. So it is, if a family member becomes very ill, how flexible is Stanford if a student needs to travel back home? Daryl, I'm thinking maybe you can share with us how a residence dean might help a student navigate these really difficult moments.
That's another good question. And it happens often. So I mentioned the residence deans earlier, which I was a part of that cohort, which is an amazing group of folks. And those residence deans, they provide a lot of support and resources for the students in these type of situations. They are boots on the ground folks. And so what happened is, all the students should know their residence dean once they come on campus. And so what happened is, a student would reach out to the residence dean and they would talk through the nuances in terms of, hey, I need to go home. What did that look like? The residence deans will reach out to the professors. They will reach out to the academic advisor folks to make sure that student is not missing courses or classes. They also, and of course, this is a pandemic. And so if that happens while we're in a pandemic, it's a different protocol because, students are getting tested. And so if a student was to leave campus during a pandemic, they would have to get tested upon their return. And so what I'm saying is we're really flexible around that. The residence dean will reach out to the student and just make sure they have all they need in terms of being supported. And they want to make sure they get home safely. They want to make sure they return safely, especially if we're in a pandemic, which we're in right now. But I mean, again, we very, very flexible with that. And that's the role of the residence dean, to make sure everything's in place so they don't have to worry. What I like about Stanford, our job is to take away the worrying from the students and that family. So we pretty flexible on that.
That's great. Thanks, Daryl. Next, I'm going to turn to you, Alex. I have a couple of questions here that have come in. First one is about the SPOT program. So the question is there a chance that all students who want to attend SPOT can attend, assuming that it's being held this year? Given the social isolation, all the incoming frosh would love a chance for this experience. And then I'll let you answer that, and then I'll get to the second one.
Yeah, we hope it's going to go on. We are literally in the middle of those conversations. I'll focus on the word all. I don't know, honestly, that every single person would be. There are some limitations due to the locations and the permits and the campsites that we're allowed to use and how many people they would allow us to do it, and the amount of staff that it takes to run it. It's a very big operation. We typically don't have to turn people away, but it is a limited number of people that are able to do it. We're crossing our fingers, obviously, with coronavirus restrictions and travel restrictions. It's still quite unknown whether we'll be able to take trips off campus, but we are trying to work through that.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, we are going to be monitoring the public health situation very carefully and constantly moving up to fall. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to do all kinds of things, but that is a great caution.
Yeah.
Second question is important. How do recreational programs work for low-income students? Does their award support them in participating?
Yeah, I'll ask for some help from Susie, from your expertise on the sort of centralized, well, I understand the centralized way to help students with any number of their activities they choose. In general, the access to the gyms and your self-directed exercise is free. We're not a 24-hour fitness, so we're not charged with making a profit or doing anything like that. Our activities are all subsidized by the general funds. So most of our activities do have some small cost in order to help offset the cost and to ensure engagement. It's a powerful tool. When you pay for something, you typically want to engage. But if you compare it to what is out there in the general public, it is all extremely reduced. Participating in, for instance, in intramurals, you know, it's $10, I think, a quarter to participate in as many things as you'd like to do. So everything is subsidized by the university, but there are typically some costs associated. But I do know that Stanford has a very robust way to help with low-income students. And my understanding is it's a centralized approach where students can apply centrally. And maybe Susie, you could address that. You're a little more versed in that than I am.
Sure, happy to, Alex, thanks. Stanford has an office called the First Gen Low Income Office that's a part of Student Affairs that has a program called the Opportunity Fund. And it is intended to help students from low income backgrounds to be able to avail themselves of any opportunity at Stanford, regardless of financial background. They work very closely with the financial aid office to determine which expenses would be covered through financial aid and which would be covered through the Opportunity Fund. But this is something that would be available to low-income students. It's also an interesting way to bridge back to Daryl's comment. Sometimes students come up against family emergencies and need help being able to support a plane ticket home, and low-income students can find help with the Opportunity Fund for that type of expense as well. Yeah, great, thank you. Moving on to the next question. This is a really important one and very important across our country right now. What is the school doing about anti-Asian hate crime? Laura, would you be willing to share what's happening from your perspective in DPS? And then Inga, maybe I could turn to you to share some of the supports that we have in place for our community.
Sure. So Stanford is an open campus, and we actually encourage people from off campus to come and engage on the community and where our community lives and works and studies. And sometimes people from off campus, mainly people from off campus, come and engage in behavior that the university does not condone. Much of what is happening on our campus actually aren't hate crimes, it's hate speech. And so it's not criminal because speech is protected. When someone does engage in hate speech, we will still document it. And if that person continues to come back to campus and we are able to identify them, the university advises them that they're no longer welcome to come to our open campus. And then at that point in time, the person could be subject to being arrested for trespassing. That's pretty rare. Even rarer is actual hate crimes, but that's not to say that it hasn't occurred on our campus. And if the person who engages in the hate speech is a member of our community, I will turn that back over to maybe Inga or Susie to address how the university has internal means to address our faculty, staff, and students who engage in behaviors that are antithetical to our beliefs and values as an institution.
I can speak to some of that. So one thing we have as a university is an acts of intolerance protocol. And so there are expectations about what behaviors we need and want from all of our community members, which lays things out pretty clearly, including how things will be kind of followed up on, investigated, so on, if people conduct an act of intolerance. And it's a pretty robust system. Actually, I've seen some of our cohort go through that when something has come up. For instance, I think, as Laura was saying, usually not violence in a physical sense, but maybe like a Zoom bombing incident and things like that. It's taken pretty seriously. But I also want to acknowledge that since these are things that are going on nationally, they can affect all of our community, even if we're not the ones who are directly targeted. For instance, one of my own staff members was talking about seeing some of these incidents on the news and saying, like, that could be my grandmother, you know, and just like how personal and how emotionally devastating some of these incidents can be, even just experiencing them vicariously, or if somebody you know this has happened to, and so on. So I think it goes well beyond our campus, and the need for emotional support and resources goes beyond things that have happened to us ourselves, but for the broader community. So I'll list some of that also. We do have what I think is a really excellent website that kind of acknowledges what's been going on nationally and talks about some of the different resources that are available and steps that people can take. So I'm posting that in the chat, that you can explore that as a resource. Also, I'll mention that our community centers are pretty fantastic. And so we call it ACUBC, but our Asian American Activity Center is really great for kind of thinking about community support for students who want to be with people who kind of like are having similar experiences, going through the same thing, sharing identities, and they hold both kind of social events, but also events in response to incidents, and also kind of offer support for people who want to talk through things going on. Similarly, CAPS and Wellbeing can offer support. We can offer coaching support, counseling services, and so on, which can be as simple as just like wanting to come in once or twice to talk through something in the news that feels scary or something you witnessed or so on. And then all of us are aware of each other. And so I kind of feel like on our campus, there's no wrong door. So contacting any one of us can really move into, here's what else might be available to you. And we really form a network thinking about like all the possible places that we can be just like, we got you. And so I really feel like that's a strength on our campus, regardless of what the situation is.
Great. Laura, Inga, thank you. That was a great capture of the resources that we're thinking about anti-Asian hate and fighting that on campus. We are nearing the hour, and I'm going to try to get 2 last questions in. So first, for Inga, if I could come back to you again. As a part of growth in college, our questioner asks, it would be so good for students to learn how to manage mental health just as well as they do their physical health. Hallelujah. Thank you for saying that. So Inga, what percentage of students utilize CAPS and well-being? And what is the most common reason for students to engage CAPS? And then finally, and I can repeat any of this if you don't capture it on the way through, what are programs to help students manage stress? Do you have frequent, maybe daily mindfulness and yoga classes? And they say, thank you. Did you catch those, Inga? Oops, Inga has lost audio.
I'm sorry, y'all. I lost audio. I'm going to leave
Good.
and come back.
We've got you. We hear you, Inga. Okay, Inga's going to leave and come back. So I am going to go to our last question, and we'll come back to Inga. And Alex, this one is for you. This is a fun one. I'm interested in learning how to camp and hike. How do I do that?
Yeah, no problem. You walk into the AOERC, the Outdoor Education and Recreation Center, take a left, walk into our awesome adventure program, and they will start you on your path. All of our programs are designed to embrace the whole spectrum of absolute beginners to almost experts. We focus more on the beginner and middle because that's where most of us are. So you walk in, you get our website. Once again, I'll put the link in, and we will get you all ready to go. We'll walk through every single step of the way with you.
Great, thanks. That sounds very easy.
Yeah.
Inga, I think you're back and with audio, so we can go back to you, and I'd be happy to repeat any part of the question that I could be helpful with.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just lost you for a second there. So this was about managing mental health. What percentage of students? Okay, great. So it's actually a fairly large number of students who utilize CAP services over the course of the year. It's about 20%. And then if you're going to add in well-being coaching on top of that, it's even more. So, and then if you include outreach services and other services that aren't about individual counseling and coaching, it's thousands more than that, because when we're talking about some of those groups, workshops, and when we get pretty large audiences. And I think the great thing there is it just kind of normalizes the need for support and how common it is to want to get some connection support resources over the course of the year. In terms of most common reasons why students might come in, it's some of the stuff you might expect. Students talk a lot about feeling anxiety, feeling stress, wanting to work on procrastination, and then also relationship issues, which could be anything from romantic relationships, friendships, just wanting to feel more connected and so on, are some of the things that come in quite a bit. And then in terms of programs to help students manage stress, we have quite a few. I mentioned before some of the things that we're doing kind of in the connection between CAPS well-being and so on, but I'll also mention that we collaborate frequently campus-wide and with all of student affairs. And so some of the things that you asked about there, like mindfulness and yoga classes and meditation, are offered on a regular basis several times a week right now. And I posted in the Q&A around the virtual well-being site. I'll post it in the chat also, but that lets you know some of the things that are just regular offerings. I think Rec and Wellness is responsible for offering some of these also. Yeah, thanks, Alex. And so I think students can just look up and access a lot of different resources that they're interested in, and yoga is included also. An interesting thing that we're doing that I think is helpful for students is that some of these resources we're also offering for particular communities or kind of in particular themes, which really helps build that community around accessing these resources. So what I mean by that is that we have yoga. There's yoga for LGBTQ students, which is a way of kind of finding each other and building that community. There's yoga for students dealing with gender-based violence or sexual assault at some point in their lives. And so I think kind of connecting around a particular need has been really helpful. Also for students of color, we have particular groups, workshops, and resources, all of which are kind of intended to both, like we said, build community, but also build a habit of mental health and well-being.
Great, thanks so much, Inga. I'm going to squeeze in one last question because I think it's probably on a lot of people's minds, and then we'll wrap up for our hour. It is, will I need to be vaccinated to attend in the fall? Well, your timing is perfect because just this morning, our Provost Persis Drell sent a message to the campus community that indicated that yes, students will need to be vaccinated to attend in the fall. This decision is a result of weeks of consideration in a vaccine task force located in our School of Medicine. And we feel that this is one of the most important things that we can do to protect the health of our community in the fall. Now, I know that this will raise some specific concerns for students, particularly international students, I think, have a lot of questions about vaccines. The vaccines aren't the same as internationally as here, and sometimes it's harder to access. I want to assure everyone that we will work with students who are not able to vaccinate in advance of arrival to have vaccination upon return. And there are also some students who may not be able to vaccinate for a variety of medical reasons or religious beliefs. And we will have an alternative pathway that will involve testing for COVID for students who are not able to be vaccinated. But the big message is that yes, Stanford has decided to require vaccination for students for the fall quarter. So we covered a lot of territory today, and I think that's a great thing because it represents what a vast array of resources and services and supports there are for you all to come to Stanford and be safe and well. And as I said earlier, one of my favorite things about these resources is that there are resources to empower you to care for yourself and your friends and your community. And there are resources where you can go and find support when you're in need. So I hope that this has given you a great overview. I urge everyone to look at the websites that have been shared and explore further some of the things that are available. And to close, I want to say how excited we all are to welcome you to this campus next fall, a place that's dedicated to your health and well-being, and that can't wait to have you find your community and belonging here. So congratulations again, and thank you so much for joining us for this hour and for your great questions. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.